it now can carry nuclear weapons. For campaign financing, they sold virtually all our secrets, but especially the miniaturization of the warheads and also improving the reliability and allowing each one of these to carry 3 nukes each. Well, where did Saudi Arabia get the nuclear war? They funded Pakistan's nuclear program from the beginning. And so the quid pro quo is Pakistan provides them the warheads. They presently have 120 of these with 3 nukes each in Salih with a range of 1,500 kilometers. They can hit all the way Greece to the west and India to the east. And so that's kind of exciting to know that. If you're in Israel, it's very nervous. Israel, it's a question of speculation as to when Israel will take that out. Let's talk about Iran. They're much in the news today, and they're going to be more in the news. Iran is the most active sponsor. These are the extremists of the extremists. They're the leadership in Iran. Everybody was hoping in the recent election they would be overturned. They weren't. They're entrenched in power. These mullahs there are committed to destroying both Israel and the U.S., and they don't care if Iran gets nuked in the process. They regard that the same attitude as suicide bomber has, that Iran's a small fraction of Islam. So they refused to cooperate with the IAEA for 20 years. They claim they're developing nuclear weapons for peaceful purposes. I'll show you why that's a cover story. They have immense oil reserves. They're second largest reserves in that. There's no reason for them to want nuclear energy. They got more. They're the primary source of energy for everybody else. They have no significant uranium reserves anyway. And so anyway, let's talk a little bit. They have the largest standing army outside NATO. They have 20,000 Russian technicians now working at Bushehr. You hear this in the news all the time, the Bushehr reactor. The Bushehr reactor is a cover reactor because Iran has discovered that our satellites can detect when their centrifuges are enriching material. So they're enriching material, presumably for Bushehr. No, they're actually enriching it for weapons grade. I'll show you why we know that. Iran has an arsenal of ballistic missiles based on this. The Sahab 3, 800, it's now been extended. The Sahab 4 is 1240. Sahab 5 is still in development, but it has about a 3,000-mile range, we think. But the point, and that means that Iran also has a good reach, but that's not the real threat. I'll come back to that in a minute. Russia is negotiating to supply Iran missile defense systems, about $3 to $4 billion program, 3-year program that's presently underway. Saudi Arabia is planning to join that pact, even though they're theoretically an ally of the U.S. And so this is a picture of, this is one of the several, I'll show you a handful of pictures that Ariel Sharon showed to President Bush in his visit to Crawford, Texas. This is a picture of the reactor at Bushehr. This is an inside picture of that reactor. This is where they're making some adjustments. But more to the point, this is an aerial photograph of Anak. It's a heavy water facility at Anak. It's used to moderate chain reactions needed to produce weapons-grade plutonium, not uranium, plutonium. And the reactor at Bushehr doesn't use plutonium. It's a uranium reactor. So this tells you there's a lot more going on than what's going on at Bushehr. This is, these are just aerial photographs. I won't take you through all of it exactly. This is at Natanz. This is where the centrifuges are working. The centrifuge, uranium hexafluoride, to enrich it to get weapons-grade material. And they have several hundred machines doing this, and they're building all this stuff underground. There are 12 sites in Iran that would have to be hit with nuclear weapons to deny them these capabilities. It's not a single airstrike kind of thing like Osirak was back in '81. This is the Iranian parliament meeting in October of 2004 on this whole issue. 247 of the 290 representatives, in taking the vote, stood up when they took the vote and shouted, "Death to the United States, death to Israel." Notice the order, U.S. first. So there is something on the internet. If you're on the internet, you'll want to check this out. There is a blue ribbon panel of the top scientists in the E-ring of the Department of Defense, headed up by Bill Graham. He's a legend in his own right. John Forrester, and also the key guy down here would be Lowell Wood, second from the bottom. These guys are the best of the best. And they undertook a study called the Commission to Assess the Threat to the United States from Electromagnetic Pulse Attack. And I had a chance to talk to Bill about this. I've always worried about EMP from a non-nuclear source. But he pointed out a lot of reasons why that's theoretically possible, but not really practical. The one you really worry about is a nuclear-generated pulse. Now, what's an electromagnetic pulse? Back in 1962 in the Pacific, there was a series of weapons tests called Starfish. In one of these, they detonated 400 kilometers over Johnston Island a nuclear device, 400 kilometers up in the sky. 1,400 kilometers away in Hawaii, the street lighting failed. They tripped alarms and circuit breakers. They did damage to telecommunication. There were even some cars that stalled. The Soviet Union also has done tests, and they also have discovered that detonating a nuclear device in the altitude causes power supply breakdowns. Let me back up. Damage to overhead, buried cables 600 kilometers away. In other words, what happens when a nuclear device detonates in high altitude? By a series, it's about a three-step process, but it happens in a microsecond. It's called the Compton effect. It generates a very, very intense magnetic pulse. That magnetic pulse is line of sight in all directions, but when it hits a wire, it sets up a current in the wire that is so intense it'll fry the equipment at both ends of the wire. And so what's the implication? Well, if you took the United States and you took a nominal warhead about 140 miles above the United States, it would generate a magnetic pulse that would go coast to coast. And that pulse would disable your telecommunications and your power grid, for starters. Your power grid does depend on telecommunications, by the way. But the scary part about this is that it would disable it not for a few hours or a few days, few months, permanently. Permanently.